My name is Raymond Ortiz, and today I'm going to share how a single sentence from my son shattered everything I thought I knew about family. What started as a quiet evening in his living room turned into the moment I realized the people I sacrificed everything for had already written me out of their story. What I did afterward changed the course of all our lives. Stay with me until the end. You won't want to miss it. And before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment about where you're watching from. Your support gives me the strength to keep telling real stories that matter. I leaned back into Adrian's dark fabric sofa, trying to sound casual. I could bring my famous turkey this year, I said, thinking of Elena's old herb-seasoned stuffing recipe. For a moment I half expected him to smile and remember. Instead, the silence pressed in, broken only by the faint scent of Claire's citrus candles burning under their 11-foot holiday tree. Adrian's hand tightened on his knee, his wedding ring flashing under the lights. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a strange finality. "Dad, you won't be welcome here for the winter feast." The words landed like a punch. I blinked. "What are you talking about?" He avoided my stare, eyes locked on the granite coffee table I'd helped them choose. "Claire's parents are coming. They'd rather it just be family. Their kind of tradition." His tone shrank with every word, like he was retreating from me. I scanned the room, the linen curtains I'd paid for, the stone-tiled floors funded by my second mortgage, the decorative trim that maxed out my credit card. Every corner whispered my sacrifices, and yet here I stood, erased from my own son's home. "Tradition?" My voice came low. "And what does that mean, Adrian?" He flinched. "Dad, please, don't make this harder." Through the kitchen arch I spotted the professional stand mixer, Gleam, being on the counter. $2,200 of my money, used maybe twice during Claire's 3-week baking hobby. The sight twisted in my chest. "So, where exactly do you expect me to go?" My words barely escaped my throat. He fumbled. "Maybe spend it with Aunt Sylvia. We can get together the weekend after." The weekend after. As if the winter feast could be shuffled like a dentist appointment. I pushed myself up, knees stiff after 7 years of carrying this burden alone. "I understand," I muttered, moving toward the door. My gaze brushed past the framed portraits where my face had grown smaller with every passing year, past the closet stuffed with Claire's endless coats. My hand rested on the knob. Without looking back, I said, "Tell her parents something for me. Happy winter feast." The December night stung my cheeks as I stepped into the cold. Behind me, I heard Adrian call once, then silence as the door clicked shut. The truck engine hummed, but I sat for a moment, staring at the twinkling lights across Westview Hills. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Adrian trying to patch things with hollow promises. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the key and drove into the dark streets of Riverbend, leaving behind a house built on my sacrifices, but never meant for me. Every corner held ghosts of the man I used to be, the father who believed love meant paying any price. That man was gone. At the stoplight on 14th and Pine, I watched a young dad load gifts into his SUV while his kids fogged the windows with their laughter. That used to be Adrian and me, before Claire, before I became nothing more than a wallet with feelings. Numbers crashed through my head like dice on a table. $3,100 every month for 6 years, $155,000 gone. The retirement Elena and I had dreamed of, erased. I gripped the wheel tighter and pressed the gas when the light shifted. On Oak Avenue, I remembered the refinancing papers. The loan officer's words echoed. "Mr. Ortiz, are you sure? That's a big risk for someone else's investment." Someone else's investment. Not my son's home, not my family's security, just someone else's gamble. At Harper Street, I thought of the second mortgage. Adrian had said, "Just temporary, Dad, until I get back on my feet." Claire had stood behind him, $750 handbag dangling from her arm, sympathy painted across her face while she counted what I was worth. The truth, I was worth nothing. By the time I pulled into my cracked driveway, The anger had burned into something colder. Inside, the house was silent, stripped of the warmth Elena once filled it with. My phone rang, the shrill sound bouncing off empty walls. Claire's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. The phone rang again, and this time I let it buzz 4 times before picking up. I'd been waiting 6 years for this moment. Raymond. Claire's voice oozed through the line, syrupy sweet. The same voice she used whenever she needed me to cover a utility bill or slip money toward their taxes. I heard about it a little. Situation with Adrian. Situation? I leaned against the counter, coat still on. You made yourself perfectly clear. She sighed, shopping bags crinkling in the background. You have to understand. My parents are very traditional. They like a certain kind of atmosphere during the holidays. A certain atmosphere? I echoed. And what exactly would that be? A pause. Then her voice sharpened. They aren't used to your kind of cooking. All that spicy food, the loud gatherings. And honestly, Raymond, they're educated people. They expect conversation about literature, politics, and art. The words cut deeper than any slap. I'd swallowed insults for 7 years, stayed quiet for Adrian's sake, but this crossed into something uglier. My kind of cooking, I said evenly. You mean the homemade empanadas you begged me to make every Sunday for 3 years? The ones you said reminded you of your grandmother? That was different. We were grateful then. But with my parents, I didn't let her finish. What you mean is you can't risk having a so-called outsider at your precious winter feast table. Her tone dropped the sweetness. Don't be dramatic. This isn't about race. It's about class. My father graduated top of his class at Northern Plains University. My mother speaks 4 languages. They summer at Silvergate Shores. Tell me, what would you bring to that dinner conversation? Stories about pouring concrete? Anger flared, but my voice stayed steady. I built a business from nothing after your husband's grandfather passed. I gave jobs to over 50 people. I've paid more in taxes than your father ever made. Money isn't everything, Raymond. Breeding matters. Education matters. Elena understood that better than you. She knew how to stay in her place. The silence that followed was heavy, dangerous. My hand tightened around the phone. What did you just say about my wife? Oh, come on. She was a cleaner who got lucky. At least she had the good sense to stay quiet. Something in me snapped. Claire, I said, voice low and unfamiliar. This conversation is over. We're finished pretending to be family. You can't just... We're done. I ended the call. I set the phone down carefully. The kitchen felt smaller but lighter, like her poison had been pushed out of the air. My hand reached for the tan legal folder I'd been avoiding for months. Inside, bank statements, mortgage papers, a trail of automatic transfers that drained me dry while they lived like royalty. 5 years of withdrawals, $3,100 every month, each entry like a scar. $156,200 total, not including the down payment, the utilities, the landscaping, the furniture. My retirement savings, Elena's life insurance, even the college fund we once dreamed of for grandchildren I'll never meet, all gone, funneled into a house where I wasn't welcome for winter feast. I pulled out my phone and dialed the bank. Central Valley Bank, this is Jennifer. How can I help you? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said, my voice calm. Account number? I rattled it off. A pause as her keyboard clicked. I see it. $3,100 each month to First River Bank, account ending in 7423. You've been making this for 6 years? Yes. The number tasted bitter. And you want it stopped immediately? I looked around my kitchen, the outdated stove, the chipped counters, the drafty windows I could never afford to repair, all because their comfort mattered more than my survival. Effective immediately, I said. It's done. Anything else I can help with? I almost smiled. No. For the first time in years, the word felt good. I ended the call with the bank and sat in the stillness of my house. Outside, Riverbend slipped into December night. Through glowing windows, families gathered freely. No conditions, no judgments, no doors slammed in their faces. For the first time in 6 years, my next month's budget will finally be balanced. For the first time since Elena passed, I could fix the porch light, buy real groceries, maybe even plan a trip that wasn't just to cover someone else's bills. I stacked the tan legal folder with statements and mortgage papers, then carried it to the wood stove. A match hissed, flames catching fast, swallowing $156,200 worth of sacrifice. Ash curled upward, and for once the heat on my face felt like freedom. My phone buzzed. Adrian, or Claire, apologies, or demands. I didn't check. Instead, I poured a glass of aged bourbon, the bottle I'd been saving for a special day that never came. Tonight was enough. I lifted it toward the framed portrait of Elena. "Happy holidays to me," I whispered, and meant it. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen as I sipped a second cup of Colombian coffee I'd finally splurged on. No countdown to the 15th. No dread of another transfer bleeding me dry. Just quiet. Just mine. At 11:15 a.m., my phone lit up with Claire's name. "Raymond," she snapped, skipping any pretense of warmth. "I need you to pick up my parents from Riverbend Regional Airport. Their flight from Crestview lands at 1:45. I set my mug down carefully. "Did you forget yesterday's conversation?" "Whatever that was, set it aside. My parents need a ride, and you're the only one free during the day. That's what family does, Raymond. They help." Her voice sharpened. "Besides, let's be honest. You're too weak to be my rival, so just get in your truck." Her contempt hit harder than the request. Less than a day after dismissing me from their winter feast, she wanted me to play chauffeur. "What airline?" I asked quietly. "Alaska Air, Flight 447, Carousel 3. And wear something decent, maybe that olive shirt from Adrian's graduation. They notice things like that. Don't embarrass us." The line went dead. "No thanks, just orders." I stared at the phone. Flight 447, baggage claim, 1:45 p.m. The wall clock above the sink read 11:20. Plenty of time. I poured another cup of coffee, added extra sugar, and opened the crossword. 7 across. Delayed gratification, 12 letters. I smiled faintly. The answer would come. By 3:05 p.m., I was nowhere near the airport. I was in my armchair, sipping Earl Grey, the Riverbend Gazette spread across my lap. Yesterday's crossword completed. Answer, postponement. The phone buzzed again. "Claire." I let it ring. Sunlight slanted across the living room, warming a space that had once felt hollow. Now it felt earned. By 3:40, the buzzing hadn't stopped. Claire's texts previewed on the screen. "Dad, where are you? My parents are—" I turned the phone face down. At 4:00, another call, an unfamiliar number. Likely her parents. I ignored it. Outside, a neighbor strung holiday lights while his children raced across the yard. Normal families. No one was stranded in baggage claim. When the clock hit 4:25, the ringing became relentless. Claire, then the unknown number, back and forth like a hornet in a jar. I unplugged the landline and powered down my cell. Silence returned, clean and absolute. I made myself a toasted cheese melt with a mug of vegetable soup, comfort I hadn't afforded in months while covering their luxuries. The sandwich came out golden, the soup steaming. I sat at the table, watching the winter sun cast long shadows over the backyard, and for the first time in years, I ate in peace. Somewhere across Riverbend, 3 furious people were probably dragging their luggage through a parking garage, fuming about taxi fares, and wondering how their driver dared to leave them stranded. The image made my soup taste better. By 5:10 p.m., I'd eaten, loaded the dishwasher, and was considering what movie to watch. It had been years since I'd had a whole evening without emergency calls for money or last-minute errands. Just as I reached for the remote, fists slammed against my front door, not knocking, pounding, shaking the frame with pure rage. Through the peephole, I saw 3 figures jammed on my porch. I opened the door and Douglas Price shoved past me, face crimson. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked. "We waited at that damn airport for over 3 hours." Evelyn Price followed, hair disheveled, lips pinched. "This behavior is barbaric for someone your age, Mr. Ortiz, absolutely disgraceful." Then came Claire, coat wrinkled, makeup smudged. "You humiliated us. Did you realize my parents had to take a $42 cab because you couldn't be bothered to show up?" Their voices overlapped in outrage until I spoke. "Enough." My tone cut clean, silencing the room. "This is my house," I said, standing firm by the door. "And you're leaving." Evelyn sneered. "You don't understand what you've done. My husband has connections, business, social, political, people who matter in this city." "This was a lesson," I said evenly, "about arrogance and the way you treat those you think are beneath you." Claire's eyes widened. "A lesson? You're nobody. You've always been nobody." "No," I said, stepping aside and pulling the door wider. "I'm the man who finally stopped being your bank account and your chauffeur. Class dismissed." Douglas jabbed a finger close to my chest. "You've made a dangerous enemy, old man. I've lived here longer than you've breathed its air. I know people who can make your life miserable." "Is that a threat, Mr. Price?" "It's a promise." His voice dropped. "Abandoning elderly people at an airport? You'll pay for that." "Indeed," Evelyn added, her smile sharp. "Actions have consequences, Mr. Ortiz. Yours will be very public." Claire tugged her father's arm. "Let's go. He's not worth it." They stormed out. Douglas paused at the threshold. "You'll regret this, I guarantee it." I shut the door and slid the deadbolt with a satisfying click. Through the window, I watched them climb into their rental, still snapping at each other as they disappeared into the night. My home felt cleaner without them, though their words, public consequences, important people, connections, echoed faintly in the quiet. I sipped my tea, still warm. Concern flickered, but something stronger overrode it. Anticipation. 3 days later, I opened the Riverbend Gazette with my morning coffee and froze. Page 3 carried my photo, an outdated shot pulled from my old business website. Headline: Riverbend Man abandons visiting couple at airport during holiday storm. My hands tightened on the mug. The article painted Douglas and Evelyn Price as helpless victims of a cruel relative who snapped. They claimed they'd been stranded for 4 hours in freezing weather. "We couldn't believe he would abandon us like that," Douglas said. "We were forced into an expensive cab. At our age, this was dangerous." Winter storm warning, they claimed. In reality, it was 49 degrees and sunny. No mention of the years I'd covered their bills. No mention of Claire's insults. No context at all. Just a twisted tale of 2 respectable visitors mistreated by an unstable old man. The city now had its villain, and it was me. I set down my coffee and reread the Riverbend Gazette article. Then again. Each pass sharpened the sting. The byline read, "Lauren Becker, features editor." I didn't know her, but I knew the playbook. Douglas Price had cashed in his network, pulling strings to smear me where it hurt most, in public. Smart move. Ruthless, but smart. For the first time, I saw my opponents clearly. They weren't just spoiled heirs throwing tantrums. They were deliberate, calculating. They understood the truth about a small city like Riverbend. Reputation outweighed fact. One headline could undo 40 years of sweat and sacrifice. They had declared war. I folded the paper neatly and pushed it aside. The businessman in me, once buried under guilt and obligation, was awake again. This wasn't about a missed airport pickup anymore. Not about the winter feast table or mortgage transfers. This was survival, and I intended to win. I opened my laptop. Their names went into search engines one by one. Douglas Price, retired Central Val, a bank manager, officer on the Riverbend Business Council, and lifelong insider. A man who built influence on trust and image, the kind of man who couldn't afford cracks in his armor. Evelyn Price's Instagram was a parade of curated vanity. Charity luncheons, wine tastings, vacations at Silvergate Shores. Caption after caption about her blessed life. Polished lies, all financed by people like me. Claire's Facebook posts were worse. Our beautiful home. Photos of the kitchen I'd bankrolled. Check-ins at five-star restaurants in months when I'd quietly covered their utility bills. Last week's status. So excited to host holiday eve dinner with family. Can't wait to show off our home. Our success. My money. And then came the clincher. Adrian's LinkedIn profile. His newest connection, Lauren Becker. The very journalist who had carved me open on page 3. A straight line between them. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the puzzle I'd assembled. They'd made 3 fatal mistakes. They'd underestimated me. They'd taken their fight public, giving me the same right. They'd documented their indulgence online, leaving a trail of hypocrisy. I pulled out a fresh document and began compiling. 5 years of transactions, the $52,000 down payment for my home equity loan, the $21,000 swipe for granite counters when laminate wasn't good enough, 60 mortgage transfers, $3,100 every month, totaling $156,200. Nearly $250,000 funneled into a household where I wasn't even allowed to sit at the table. My desk turned into a courtroom. Bank statements, receipts, canceled checks, side by side with their smiling vacation photos, Evelyn's wine glass, Claire's designer handbags, decorations glittering on a tree 11 feet tall, all underwritten by me. By nightfall, everything was stacked into a tan legal folder fat enough to stop a bullet. 12 identical sets, one for each guest invited to their grand winter feast dinner. At the top of every packet, I clipped the Gazette article with my handwritten notes in red. False, beside Douglas's lies about a storm. Missing context, scrawled next to the claim I was unstable. I circled December 20th on my wall calendar. Not as a holiday. As Judgment Day. Claire's public event post had already handed me the perfect stage. An audience of friends, neighbors, and fellow socialites. The very people who shaped opinion in this town. They would see the truth with their own eyes. I set my suit out. The gray suit I'd once worn to Elena's funeral. Clean, pressed, heavy with memory. This time, it wouldn't mark a loss. It would mark the end of my silence. Tomorrow, the Prices would learn that when you drag a man into war, you'd better pray he doesn't remember how to fight. That night, I wasn't just shedding the skin of a doormat. I was stepping into the man who demanded respect. At 7:00 p.m., my briefcase was packed with evidence, and I drove to Maplewood Heights. Their house glowed like a stage set, cars jammed along Oak Avenue, laughter spilling through windows framed with linen curtains I'd paid for. I parked across the street and checked my watch. 7:00 sharp. Perfect. The feast would be in full swing, wine poured, plates full, no easy exit for anyone. The front door was, predictably, unlocked. Claire always boasted about how safe her neighborhood was. Security was for other people. I stepped inside, the hum of conversation rolling over me. Through the dining room archway, I heard Evelyn Price declare, "But in our family, we don't do things that way, darling." More laughter. My fists tightened. Their family, after exiling me. I entered the dining room, briefcase in hand. 12 faces, femme, rose mid-bite. Claire's glass stopped in mid-air. Adrian turned pale. Douglas and Evelyn looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Good evening," I said evenly, setting the briefcase on their granite sideboard. "I hope you don't mind me joining your winter feast." Claire found her tongue first. "Raymond, this is highly inappropriate. You need to leave." "Actually," I replied, opening the case, "your guests deserve to know who paid for this house, this dinner, and every decoration you've been flaunting." Gasps and whispers rose as I moved around the table, laying a packet in front of each guest. 5 years of records, I said, my voice calm. $156,200 in mortgage transfers, plus $52,000 for your down payment. Renovations, appliances, furniture, every luxury you've enjoyed. The room fell into rustling paper. Eyes widened. A woman in pearls murmured, This is outrageous." "Claire, why didn't you tell us?" asked a man in a tailored blazer. Her mask cracked. It's not what it looks like. He offered to help. Offered? I slid copies of the Gazette article onto the table. Then explain why your father-in-law planted this hit piece. Why was I smeared as unstable for refusing to be your chauffeur? Recognition dawned across faces as they matched my photo in print, with the man standing before them. Notice the lie, I said, tapping Douglas's quote. They claimed they were stranded in a winter storm. In reality, it was 49 degrees and sunny, and they weren't vulnerable tourists. They were your hosts, denied nothing for years while I emptied my accounts. A man in a cashmere sweater turned to Douglas. Is this true? Because it looks damning. Evelyn shifted in her chair, lips trembling. We never said. You never said what? I cut in, pulling out screenshots from Claire's own posts. That my food wasn't cultured enough? That my conversations weren't fit for your educated circle? The charity friend on Evelyn's right looked horrified. Evelyn, surely you didn't. Douglas tried to bluster. He's unstable, under stress. Financial stress? I snapped. I've been shoveling nearly $3,100 a month into your daughter's household. If anyone here should be called unstable, it's the people bleeding me dry while plotting my destruction. The room shifted, like the ground itself had tilted. Chairs creaked as guests leaned away from the prices, their polished reputations collapsing under the weight of undeniable numbers. Adrian's voice finally cracked the silence, low and trembling. Dad, I didn't know about the newspaper. I met his hollow stare. But your wife knew, and her parents orchestrated it. They painted me as a monster because I stopped being their bank. The silence was no longer awkward. It was suffocating. For them. The shift at the table was unmistakable. The glittering surface cracked, and the truth poured out. This is disgraceful, said an older woman in pearls, her eyes locked on the highlighted bank transfers. Douglas, how could you let your daughter bleed this man dry, then try to bury him when he finally drew the line? Douglas's face tightened, his practiced calm unraveling. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, she cut in, her voice sharp. He funded your family's lifestyle while you treated him like hired help. And when he stopped, you tried to assassinate his character. Shameful. Evelyn's reply came strangled. He abandoned us at the airport. I kept my tone steady. After Claire told me I wasn't welcome at their winter feast, after 6 years of paying their bills while they mocked my background and education. That's the truth. The silence was suffocating. 12 faces stared, not at me, but at them, with disgust, embarrassment, and betrayal. Claire's voice broke through, brittle and desperate. Everyone, please, this is a private matter that's gotten out of hand. No, I said firmly, closing my briefcase. It stopped being private when you dragged me through the Gazette. You wanted a public fight. Now you have one. I looked around the room at neighbors, friends, acquaintances, people who now saw the reality behind the marble and linen. When you read my name again in the paper, you'll know the full story, not the lies. I straightened my gray suit and stepped away from the table. Enjoy your meal. It's the last one I'll ever pay for. As I walked toward the door, the eruption began. Raised voices, accusations, the collapse of their carefully staged respectability. To me, it was the sweetest holiday melody I'd ever heard. On a Wednesday morning in April, I signed for a certified letter. The spring air smelled of cut grass and possibility, not of the bitterness that had hung over December. Notice of default, 3 missed mortgage payments, $9,200 in arrears, 14 days to cure the account or face foreclosure. I set it aside like distant weather, not my storm anymore. My phone had been buzzing for weeks, blocked numbers, voicemails from Claire, even Evelyn's frantic pleas. Their social standing in Riverbend had crumbled since that dinner. Invitations vanished, doors closed. Even Adrian had called a dozen times, his voice breaking, but I let them all go unanswered. Until that evening, 95 days later, when Adrian knocked on my door. Gone was the confident man who had once excluded me from his table. He looked worn out, his ash-gray suit rumpled, eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. Desperation clung to him like stale smoke. "Dad," he said softly, "we need to talk." I stepped aside. He entered, glancing around my home as though seeing it for the first time. The fresh paint, the stone-tiled floors finally repaired, the new recliner I'd bought with my own paycheck. For once, the money had stayed. "Here." "Nice place," he murmured. "It's what happens," I replied, "when you spend on yourself instead of feeding other people's dreams." He sank onto my dark fabric sofa, nervous, restless. "Dad, I need you to know how sorry I am. For dinner, for the Gazette, for letting Claire and her parents treat you like that." I said nothing. Just wait. I didn't know Douglas planted that story. When I found out, he rubbed his temples. "The things they said about you, about Mom's memory. I should have stopped it. I should have defended you years ago." At Elena's name, my jaw tightened, but my voice stayed even. "And what exactly did they say about your mother?" His eyes fell to the floor. That she knew her place. That she didn't challenge people. That she belonged in the background. Silence hung between us. "Yes," I said at last. "You should have stood up." The weight of 5 years pressed down on us both. Outside, a neighbor's mower hummed, a reminder of how ordinary life could be for families that valued each other. Finally, Adrian spoke again, voice cracking. "The house is in foreclosure. We can't keep up. Not without—" He stopped, realizing. "Without my money," I finished for him. His shoulders slumped. "I know how much it was." Claire calculated after Christmas. "Over 200,000. $224,900, I corrected. I counted every cent. My retirement, Elena's insurance, gone. His face crumpled. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, son," I said quietly. "The money is gone. And more importantly, the years are gone. 5 years I could have spent being your father, not your banker." Adrian's eyes glistened. "I know. But maybe we could start over. Maybe—" I cut him off. "Are you asking me to resume the mortgage?" The flicker of hope in his face died. "We're going to lose everything, Dad. The house, Claire's respect, her parents' approval. I don't know what I'll do." "You'll figure it out," I said, not unkindly. "The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you entertained people who thought I was beneath them." Tears rolled down his face. "I lost you, didn't I? I chose them. And now I've lost you forever." I studied him for a long moment. The boy I'd raised was still there, buried under years of poor choices and borrowed pride. "No, Adrian, you didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference." He wiped his face. "Is there any chance you could forgive me?" "I forgave you months ago," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending none of this happened. It means if you want a relationship, you'll have to rebuild it from scratch. With respect. With choices that honor what's right, not what's easy. And the next time someone tries to shut me out, your wife, her parents, anyone, you'll remember who actually acts like family." Adrian nodded slowly, the weight of my words sinking in. "And the house?" "Not my problem anymore," I answered, settling back into my chair. "You're a grown man. Handle it like one. Get work that pays. Sell if you must. Live within your means. Stop expecting handouts." He straightened, dignity flickering back into his posture. "You're right about all of it." "I know." At the door, he hesitated. "Dad, for what it's worth, when you walked into that dinner, when you laid it all out, I was embarrassed, angry, but proud too." "Good," I said. Maybe there's hope for you yet. When the door closed, I poured a glass of good whiskey and stepped onto the back porch. Spring had come to Riverbend, trees budding, air warm with promise. In 4 months, I'd be 63. Elena had been gone 8 years. I had wasted 5 of those years as a doormat. I wouldn't waste another. My phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. Dinner Sunday. The kids want to show you their projects. I smiled and typed back, wouldn't miss it. Because family, I realized, wasn't about blood or borrowed approval. The real family wanted you at the table. Everything else had been an expensive theater, and I was done buying tickets. The whiskey tasted like freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I chose to make it.